Hi, and welcome to Data Talks, where today we'll be focusing on the explosive pace of AI innovation and what it means for the enterprise. Joining me today, we have three generative AI experts. We'll be first talking trends with AI celebrity Dr. Craig Martell, our very own CTO here at Cohesity, after he'd served in roles as Chief Digital Artificial Intelligence Officer at the Department of Defense and Head of Machine Learning at both Lyft and Dropbox. Then we'll be speaking with Ryan Reed, Global Head of IT Products and Services at JSR Corporation, to talk us through his views and key considerations for AI adoption in the enterprise. And then bringing it all together will be Technical Director Jonathan Bell to show us how we can best integrate data security with the power of LLM AI agents. Now, I know many of you have signed up for Dry January, or perhaps avoiding Dry January, dry news for January, because there's just so much and it's hard to take in. The fire hose of information makes it difficult to isolate what is relevant versus what we can put to use and what's noise, right? So there's been this explosion of tools on the market, and they all come with different aspects to them. But one I think has been an emerging conversation is around DeepSeek. For one, if you don't know, they're a Chinese company whose tools rival many of the existing tools that are in the market now, having a ripple effect, not just on markets, but in reaction to privacy concerns and what these kind of click-through agreements offer. And in fact, it got a rise out of the US Navy, who's already made a move to ban DeepSeek as an app. So it's a conversation we should be having about which tools we choose to use and what they're going to be doing with that data in any sort of SaaS model on your phone or wherever it may be. But I'm kind of burying the lead here because there's a flurry of AI agents announcements, and that's really where our focus will be. So I wanted to pivot first to things like Operator from OpenAI. So this operator agent is capable of autonomous performing tasks such as ordering groceries or filing expense reports, that sort of thing. And Oracle has an AI agent for sales professionals that'll also do automated, semi-automated tasks and include customer interactions and data management. But there's a long list of additional announcements in this space for agents from NVIDIA and Microsoft and several others. Deloitte just had a survey on agentic AI and its adoption, and they revealed that 26% of companies have tested agentic AI at this point, agentic meaning a capability of performing tasks autonomously in the final months of 2024. Despite rapid adoption, challenges remain with regulatory compliance, with 42% of businesses saying this is a major concern for them. And I don't know if you follow the World Economic Forum out of Davos, but they've also been tapping on this topic of agentic AI. And they wanted to highlight the importance of governance and the mindset shift towards accepting AI, and I quote here, AI as coworkers, which is interesting. Davos. And even the Vatican had to chime in. So the Vatican made a comment about its concerns about the role of AI in not just deep fakes, but its potential to change human employment. And they were referring to it as enslavement by technology. These developments underscore the rapid evolution of AI agents, their growing integration into various aspects of business daily life. Innovation is outpacing regulation and leading to uncertainty and legal battles. So with that, I think it's time to bring in an expert to help me parse this out. I am pleased to welcome CTO Dr. Craig Martell. And Craig, how was Davos?
Well, I was really excited about going to Davos this year, but somehow the invitation didn't just get to me. So I'm going to have to ask all my good friends when they get back.
Thanks for playing along. I appreciate that. No, seriously, AI is, you've been an AI pioneer in this space for a long time. Can you help us unpack what the context is for us here? Just maybe even some fundamentals. What should we consider an AI agent to be before we get to what it means for us? How should we start?
So I'm going to repeat thanks for having me back on again, by the way. And I'm going to repeat something I had last time I was here is what's AI? What's AI? AI is statistics at scale. You gather data from the past, you build a model and use it to predict the future. That's not very different when we're talking about agentic AI. The difference is, what are we predicting? So we're going to gather data from the past, we're going to have some input, and an agent outputs a plan. So you can think about agentic AI as simply AI that takes an input and spits out a plan. So that's all an agent is. So an agent doesn't actually have to be an AI agent. A program, in some sense, is an agent because you put something in and it does a set of things. The interesting aspect is the statistical aspect. I put something in, it tries to understand the input, it tries to understand the data that it has, and then it makes, from a set of possible actions, it chooses the possible action that makes the most sense. But again, basically, input to a plan.
I understand you're talking about statistics at scale, but I'm understanding, or maybe I'm conflating the way some of these rules engines govern not only what's okay to share, but how we might be potentially infusing sort of tribal knowledge for a particular role. So the way I'm understanding or I'm reading about from these news lines is that they're looking to have a specific marketing AI agent that can operate as if they've been trained in that field or in sales or in other roles. How do those things work together with the LLM to create this sort of notion of what that role would actually do?
So that's great. Again, we're going to bring it back down to AI is simply statistics at scale. It gathers data from the past to predict the future or to generate, in the case of generative AI, to generate something that you might want in the future. So what does it mean in the agentic space? Well, you have a set of data that represents the behavior of a marketing person, or you have a set of data that represents the behavior of making a sales call. And when you still use that data, so you can think about the agent as just a really big AI system, right? It's just a bigger AI system. And you still use the output data that you want to achieve, given that input, to fine tune the system to make sure as close as possible it behaves like that persona that you want. So it's not that different. It's just bigger. So let's be clear. It's much bigger. And the compute is going to be bigger. And the amount of data that you need, or the types of data that you need, or the way that you apply data is changing and will continue to change. But fundamentally, I want to create a marketing agent, say, and it takes some input from some social media post and it figures out the best response and a response to that social media post, or it reposts something else, or from a catalog of other things, that a menu of other things that you might want that marketing agent to do. But you still train it on input data and output data. You say things like, for this input, something like this would be the best output, part of the training. For this input, something like this would be the best output, part of the training. Now, you can find ways to make that more efficient, like by training this part of the agent, then training this part of the agent, then training this part of the agent. But you still have to evaluate the system as a whole to make sure that it's actually representing the marketing persona. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. But the thing that I find interesting is the autonomous words, or the use case around the autonomous part. So it's not just providing an answer; it could be actually taking actions without a human intermediary, which, as you've referred to before, that last sort of sanity check on whether it's a hallucination or not, that autonomous piece, is that inherent in all agents, or there's sort of a sliding scale there?
Well, I mean, no, it's not inherent. Remember, an agent is just an input to a plan. That plan could be do a bunch of things, show them to a human before executing. That could be the plan. Or the plan could be, if done with enough fidelity, just go ahead and make that action. Let me give you sort of an example from a different domain. When you're driving your car in autonomous mode, adaptive cruise control, or I have a couple cars now that I can take my hands off the wheel. It's really nice in California traffic to be able to take my hands off the wheel. Am I involved in every action that it makes? No, I can't be, because it's making decisions 1,000 times a second, right? But I do have supervisory power to make sure that if it does start to do an action that I don't want, I can grab a hold of the steering wheel, right? But we've tested that system as a whole, and we've gotten comfortable. We've gotten what I've called justified confidence that the system, if you let it be autonomous, has an error envelope that looks like this. 99.9% of the time, it does the right thing. For the 0.1% of the time, it's my responsibility to jump in. Well, there's something similar that applies here. If you get to the point where you believe your marketing agent is doing things correct 90% of the time, and that other 10% of the time, you have some mitigating tools to help guide it, then you're great. But no matter what, you have to develop justified confidence that the system is going to do what you want it to do. the system as a whole. So by that, I mean the whole agent flow from input to whatever your final action is.
I see. So in this assessment, people are going to sit back, maybe like me, and out of ignorance be more fearful of this technology, or out of ignorance maybe overlook things that they should be concerned about. So how do we tune our expectations and understandings for where those edges are, where if we're not paying attention, bad things could happen, or if we kind of take our hands off the wheel prematurely, bad things could happen.
Right, because you have accidents in autonomous driving vehicles, right? So it still sometimes goes off the rails. Mm-hmm. This is where governance is unbelievably important, and governance within your company in developing these, and what's the right set of rules to be able to deploy these systems really becomes important inside your organization. So, for example, for me, a system should always be able to alert the user when it's potentially doing something wrong. And there should always be what I call a human escape hatch, the ability of the human to jump in and fix it. Now, that's becoming more and more difficult. So there needs to be more research and more energy. We do a lot of it here at Cohesity, but more energy focused on how do we allow for that human escape hatch while allowing for the most autonomy possible. So what's the human escape hatch in the driving example? You just put your hands on the wheel, right? And you can turn the wheel the way you want to, and it overcomes it, right? If you fall asleep, that's on you, right? So that's not, I don't blame the car for your falling asleep. Your responsibility was to keep your hands close to the wheel and pay attention. Okay. Well, what does that mean if I have a marketing agent? Well, maybe before the copy goes out, you just take a look at it. We could think of lots of ways in which we get ridiculously great productivity gains without the embarrassment that the marketing just goes awry, right? So I think it's incumbent upon the organization, one, to think hard about training, to think hard about quality, but also think hard about what's the framework for deployment in your company.
Okay. So there's things like compliance risks for what data it's going to have access to. Mm-hmm. There's going to be bias and potential fairness concerns, but probably less so in a business construct because you're trying to...
There might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, the hallucinations, it sounds like you talk to one person, they say it's a thing of the past, because we've been able to get more accurate data sets and they can filter out for these things, and there's self-checking and that sort of thing. And then there's other people saying, oh no, we're quite a bit away from being able to eliminate the hallucination aspects of this. Right. Where do you think we are on that spectrum?
So I hate the word hallucination. It's simply an error. The system just got it wrong, right? That's the right. So hallucination makes it sound like it's this intelligent thinking thing that just took the wrong mushrooms. Right? That's not what's going on. It's a statistical system that's generating words or pixels or code. It's just generating things. And if it generates the things that you want in that context, it got it right. If it generates the things that you don't want in that context, we call that a hallucination. It just got it wrong. It's an error. So I think it's really important, not impossible. I think it's probably impossible to get rid of hallucinations, right? Because they're statistical systems, and it's impossible to get rid of errors in a statistical system. It is guaranteed to be sometimes wrong. That's what it means to be a statistical system. It's guaranteed to be sometimes wrong. So, but we're getting better and better, and we're like, think about machine translation. Machine translation has gotten so good. I walked around China with my phone, just aiming it at signs, and it got me around, and I was able to buy whatever I needed to buy. And when there were errors, well, then I ended up buying the wrong milk, right? So the error risk, like I was looking for skim milk and I ended up with whole milk. Okay. The error risk was pretty minimal, so I was willing to take that risk. It's really important when we deploy these systems to ask, what's the error envelope? And what kind of errors does it make? What's the likelihood of it's making an error? And what do we do when it does? Because it will. And I do think that's the piece that's most ignored. What do we do when it makes an error? And I really think we should be pushing harder on that.
And this may not be something that you're super close to, but in terms of the human impact of getting teams to buy into wanting to have an AI coworker in this space, right? That's a whole psychological human behavioral conversation. But you've been in the game long enough to see people work side by side with lots of different, even modeling tools. Where do you see this working and potentially having risks?
I think it's going to work. I mean, if you like, even just a spell check was called AI 20 years ago, and the little blue squiggles under your writing on your online doc that tells you that you got the grammar wrong, that was called AI, 15 years ago. And the search results were called AI in 98. Well, they were called machine learning, right? But it's information retrieval, which is a subfield of machine learning, right? So we've always found these new exciting things that made us more productive. Search made us unbelievably more productive, right? And so they help us get more productive. They help us do our job, and we just end up developing justified confidence in the system, and we figure out when we can trust it and when we can't, and we adjust to that, and we become a human machine team, and we use that teaming to become more and more productive. I don't see that changing here very much at all. And will it change the way we're productive? What we do during our day? Probably.
Yeah.
But we no longer have file cabinets where we go spend hours searching through them to find things. We just type it in and we find it. So it's changed the way we do our job. That's going to happen.
I really appreciate how you were able to provide that context and information, and actually lower the anxiety level, at least for me and maybe for some of our listeners, to get that context to bring down the fear in that space and see its practical applications. That's super, super helpful. Thank you, as always, for making time for us here on Data Talks. Your input is incredibly valuable. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I'm very pleased to welcome our next guest, Ryan Reed, Head of IT Products and Services at JSR Corporation. Ryan, welcome to the webcast. Thanks for making time for us today. How you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk with you.
Excellent. Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Denver right now, where it's luckily in a break in between the snowstorms.
Fantastic. So I know you've helped us out on a number of webcasts, and we love to get your participation. But for those who are unfamiliar with those other times when we had the opportunity to hear you speak, can you get us caught up on a bit about your company, the work that you do, and how you're incorporating AI into your workflows today?
You bet. So JSR we're a material innovation company. We are a Japanese company. We are a global company, and we are in a number of different industries. We provide a key raw material for semiconductor manufacturing. We make some of the layers that go into LCD TVs. We have a plastics business. We have a life sciences business that goes into drug discovery. And then we also do contract development manufacturing. So we're in a number of different spaces. And if you kind of think about it, the thing that we do is within all those spaces, we are creating new intellectual property through creating new chemical materials. And so in my role, I lead IT and then really focused on enterprise services across all of those companies. So how do we think about what are the tools and services that we can use and we can deploy to make sure that users have a consistent experience, and how we are running those? And when you think about some of the things that we've done is Cohesity has been a key aspect of that, where we really want to think about how are we securing our data. And also as part of that, now with Cohesity Gaia, it's really about how do we accelerate what we're using our data for. And so with the AI revolution, of course, we were doing machine learning and we were having material informatics and those types of things before. But with this opportunity now to really democratize that and allow people to have natural language conversations with that data, what we're really looking at is how do we combine that and how do we use that to accelerate that innovation within the space that we're working on? How do we focus on creating those next generation of materials?
Wow, that sounds really exciting. And I don't say that to all our guests, but that actually sounds really, really exciting stuff to work on. So I've been hearing from a lot of different folks as they go through this thought process of bringing in different tools to do, just as you're saying, not just accelerate, but bring consistency and get more out of the processes that you're doing. And they're looking for various AI tooling that can help them do that. But it's kind of a broad decision tree to think about all the various tools that are out there, the pros and cons, not just of the tool themselves, but of implementing them. How did you go through or navigate such a decision tree to land on the tool set that you have, and how's it been going?
Yeah, so I think that that's been a really interesting journey. So probably like everyone else, just about 2 years ago, everyone was running around trying to figure out what are we going to do with this, and we hear from C-level executives that we must go do something with Gen AI right away. And so we've been really looking at this, and we've been evaluating different tools and how they work. But of course, the first foundation is really the data. And so how are we going to access the data? What format is that data in? Is that in databases? Is it unstructured data? And how do we think about our data to begin with before we start thinking about surfacing it in front of the tools? And so that's been one of the biggest journeys, which is as we think about what are the tools that are available, is how do they access that data? And then, of course, one of the things that comes in very quickly after that is, well, how do we think about the security of the data? So really, anytime we start talking to a department, especially an R&D department, saying, hey, we want to be able to have people interact with your data, they're like, hang on. I want to make sure that I understand the security around that, and what does the tool do, and where does the data live, and who can access that. And so as we've been thinking about it, it's really been a combination of all of those things, which is what is the format of the data? How do we make sure that there's security associated with that data? And then how do we make sure that those data sets are set up in a way that makes sense, and then provide that access? So those have been some of the areas that we've been looking at. And then what we've also found is that just because there's a tool out there doesn't necessarily mean that our business users know how to use that tool. And so we've been really trying to focus on helping them have these kind of quick wins with how do you think about using that data? We don't want it to be that IT has to be the bottleneck, if you will, of everything has to go through IT and we have to configure it. We really want to be able to start pushing that into the user's hands and really starting to allow them to understand that. And so with something like, Cohesity Gaia, being able to think about, hey, I've already got this data. It's already backed up. There's already a structure around that data. And then with the idea that it also knows already the security. And I've already I've already used it. I've been comfortable with that. I've done disaster recovery tests. So we understand that Cohesity understands and honors our role-based access permissions. And then also one of the neat things about it is that I can also do targeted data sets in order for that data to go into Gaia to be able to have people ask those questions. So it's not like we're just saying, hey, we're going to open up the floodgates and we're going to do everything. We can really work with specific departments on how we are providing that data and where they're able to use that in order to start having some of those, if you will, experimental quick wins.
That's absolutely fantastic stuff, because you brought up some of the key things that are always inspiring for us to talk with accounts with is, you mentioned data privacy, you mentioned the being able to get the right data to the right people in the right ways, and giving them a tool set that they can already relate to right out of the gate. That is absolutely fantastic insights. And I'm sure all of the tooling that you've been able to pull together did come with some growing pains. What are some of the things that maybe surprised you, or challenges or limitations and workarounds you've maybe had to consider in the process? How's that been going?
Yeah, one of the ones that I mentioned was first and foremost was just because you give people a tool and saying, hey, you can go interact with the data, thinking about how do they actually use that? And so really making sure that you kind of understand those use cases, and then you can work together with people on working with that. Then there's the other part, which is just because I have the data, how do I interact with it? What questions do I go ask about that? That was one of the coolest features I think that I've seen with Gaia, and I still haven't seen it with anywhere else, where you have this concept of a word cloud. So you have this concept of, hey, what's in the data? What can I go ask it about? And that was really a game changer from an innovation standpoint. So now that we can start to go and understand, if we're going and doing a HR search or a legal search, we can start to understand some of the terms that may be in a data set that we're going to go see, and we can understand maybe how that business user was using that term so that we can go ask more targeted questions about the data. So those were some of the things that we found. The biggest one is really just data access. And how do I don't want to have to go and figure out, how do I go query this database, or how do I go query this API, or how do I go start to crawl these different text files? That has been the biggest challenge, and that's really where we saw some of the other models really struggle. Was if you could get the data into a format that those models accepted, it worked. And that's really, again, where Cohesity already touches all my data. It already knows what's going on with my data. And so that really removed for us that barrier to be able to say, all right, now I can start thinking about what are those business use cases and helping my users understand how to interact with the data versus spending, if you will, the IT and the technology time to figure out how do I massage the data to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm delighted to hear that you're having a great experience with Gaia and Cohesity in general. But obviously, what I was hoping people are getting out of this conversation is just what your underpinning of this conversation is. It's just the importance of the data and its validation, where it lives, who has access to it. That it really is. All these other LLMs that are out there, all these other tools that you'll be able to point at your data really do depend on the governance component of it. And irrespective of whether that's a Cohesity system or not, that data governance piece is really foundational to making this work in your environment. So I totally appreciate that perspective. And I think for a lot of people, just kind of going a little off script here, but I think for a lot of people, it seems like a wild time of crazy evolution, and should we be afraid of all of these, sci-fi doomsday scenarios with things? And so I'll just ask, because it's probably on the curiosity list for others. Did your team shrink dramatically when you brought in AI? And have there been the bias concerns or the hallucination challenges? And what's been your experience on that front anyway, just for entertainment purposes alone?
Sure. Yeah, I think what we've really seen is what AI is just an accelerator at this point. Now, I think in the future that will change. But what we see is that right now we see that as the 10 to 30% accelerator. And if my organization is like every other organization, we didn't have enough people to do all the work to begin with. And so if we can remove some of those base level tasks and we can enable people to be that 10 to 30% more effective, then we really are just helping them work through that. And so we haven't seen that. We also see that we do have where we are really trying to make sure that as we have an aging population, especially where we have different countries like Japan, we want to make sure that knowledge is relevant and stays for as the organization continues to evolve and as people kind of age out, we want to make sure that we have that knowledge. When we think about biases, that hasn't been as big of an issue for us because a lot of that is then going with the retrieval augmented generation on our data. But of course, hallucination is a big thing. And so especially as we're trying to think about that, and we have seen with a lot of the models now that where we start to see these kind of recursive queries that are very validating that the data that's coming back is correct, and that there's some of those guardrails around that. We haven't seen that much of it as a huge issue from a hallucination standpoint. And then also being able to have more and more citations where you can actually go back to that source document and you can click through so you can just verify that, yeah, this does exist. So hallucinations are still a big concern, but they haven't been as much of a concern in kind of real world usage.
That's super powerful. Ryan, you're always a pleasure to have on a webcast. You bring so much valuable perspective to real world applications of these technologies and how you're putting them to use right away. So thank you. Really, really valuable stuff. Really appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
You are welcome. And thanks for everything. We really appreciate the partnership with Cohesity, and we look forward to seeing the continued evolution of the tools.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Jonathan Bell to help us make sense of this in a real world application. So I was hearing stacks of concerns, both from our news stories and just in general across this topic, concerns about where the data and who the data access, et cetera, and even how the data is compiled and referenced, et cetera. But then there's also this tremendous need for speed, the competitive edge and business value that people have to address. Jonathan, welcome, but how do we begin to square this circle and have these apparent competing interests find resolution?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jake. I would say the first place you have to really start thinking is, how are we going to get this into the end user tools? At the end of the day, we want end users to be able to put their hands on this. This is not a, cool IT toy for the nerds in the back room to be, hoarding to themselves. to really drive value in this space, we need the end users to be able to have an interface into these agents, into these AI tools, so that they could get their job done more efficiently, so that you get this value that you're looking for from the AI tools you're investing in.
Can you show us how we can begin?
Absolutely. So let me dive right into this demo. As you can see on my screen here, we've got our Cohesity Data Cloud screen here. We're going to jump right into the insights, because this is where we're going to be leveraging Cohesity technology to help get this in the end user's hands. Within Insights, we have Data Insights, which is going to bring us to our Cohesity Gaia interface. Just for a summary for the folks who may not have heard of Cohesity Gaia before, Cohesity Gaia keeps your private data that is stored in the Cohesity Data Cloud private, and it gives you an AI interface so you can have conversations with this data, so that you can dive deeper into these big unmanageable data sets you might have to actually be able to pull information out. The other thing that's important here is you'll see that we have these data sets created, and you can also use things like RBAC to secure them, so that only certain users have access to certain data sets and certain pools of data that they can derive their answers from. If you noticed when I first jumped into the tool, we are at helios.cohesity.com, and then there was a few steps to actually log in and get to this interface. This is not something you would typically associate with an end user action. When an end user is using a tool, they want to be able to do things like use Teams, for example, which we're going to show in a little bit, or one of the other co-pilots, for instance, or one of the other tools that they have at their fingertips. So how do we do that? Well, to do that, we're going to be showing today how it works with the Copilot editor in a Copilot context. But since Cohesity has developed these publicly facing APIs into our Gaia platform, we could build agents in other ecosystems as well. So for starters, you can see that I built a Cohesity Gaia agent here. Just know that I built a generic agent for the demo, but in certain instances, you may want, say, an accounting agent. So Bob in accounting can get to accounting data and derive insights from it. You may want a marketing agent. So Sally in marketing can go and get answers related to her marketing content and the things that she's trying to do. All of these are essentially equally as easy to make, and we take a lot of the hard work out of it for you. So let's jump into the Cohesity data agent here, or Gaia agent here. Now, as this pulls up, one of the things that you'll see is that we have certain things that we can configure, certain things that Dr. Craig Martell was referencing, such as you have to be able to give it a set of instructions. You have to be able to give it a plan to be able to execute. All of that is actually done with text. Within the agent here, you give it a description of what you want it to do, and then you give it instructions on how it should respond to those end user queries. But what you really have to remember is, fantastic, now we have an interface, we have a way to get to things, but we need it to be able to go take action, right? The thing that makes this AI tool agentic is its ability to receive from a conversation data about actions that you want it to take and go actually act on. So diving into actions here, you'll see that we have configured Cohesity Gaia connectors that can actually reach out to Gaia from within the Copilot. So how does that work? The Copilot is going to be your conversational interface, equated to like a normal software UI. So I'm going to use the Copilot interface, or in this case, the integration of Copilot into Teams, to be able to have the basic conversation with me. It's going to be able to answer my questions. It's going to be able to process that question. It's going to be able to realize it needs to reach out and take this action. And then it's going to reach out to Cohesity Gaia to get the data it needs to return the result you want. So I'm going to flip over to Teams real quick to show this in action, but I want to set it up a little bit. Be aware that the way this is working, all of the data in the data set is staying within the Cohesity Data Cloud ecosystem. So in this case, this is for our customers who've already trusted Cohesity to handle their data, to be able to hold that data in the backend in a secure way, and then also to be able to provide access to that data in a mature, manageable, meeting your secure needs from your CISO, et cetera. The interaction with Copilot and with Teams is going to be a text query that is sent to Gaia by the agent for it to be able to pull that information and get that information you need at your fingertips into the end user tools. So the result when it comes back is going to be an interaction where it received a text query, and then the only thing it's sending back is the answer to that query, and also the source docs that we had backed up and let you know where we got that. So if you need to do further investigation, you could go directly to the point that we got the information from to go do some investigation. All right, so I'm going to pause there for a second, and we're going to start a new chat. I want to interact with my Cohesity Gaia agent. And as you can see, what we had configured in Copilot Studio is available here for us in Teams. If you would like to use another interface, the Copilot Studio also gives you the ability to publish into different channels as well. So you might not be a Teams user, you might be using Slack or one of the other applications here. You would simply be able to take this agent, give this to your Slack administrators. They would be able to integrate it with Slack or one of the other tools. And then within that ecosystem, you can also assign permissions for who can get to it. All right, so we're going to start a new conversation here with the Cohesity Gaia agent. Let's just start by saying hello. As you can see, it's the Cohesity Gaia agent. How can I help you today? I'm going to say I'd like to query my data. That's something I want to do. I want to get some more information. At this point, it's going to it's using Copilot to go back and look at its instructions and say, I have to reach out to Cohesity now so that I can understand what data is even available for this user to be able to query. So in this case, available to me in Cohesity Gaia are a standard LLM, which is more like one of the MIDI models you're used to, and an advanced LLM, which is more feature-rich and can do more advanced queries and actually will have longer responses. And then it will also give me the available data sets. So in this case, my user has access to a digital core, which is some fake company data. We've got Cohesity docs. We've got a CIA fact book, a Federal Reserve beige book, and then also just a generic data store. This is all pulled real time, and it is tied to my user permissions. So this is not just some random group of data or give the user access to everything. And this is also how we power those purpose-built agents as well. So if, again, Bob in accounting only had access to, say, the digital core data, we could RBAC it so that he would only see that data set. All right. The other cool thing about this is it's a conversational LLM. So I don't have to treat it like a software command line or something like that. I can talk to it conversationally. It will derive meaning from what I'm trying to do using the Copilot LLM, and then it will apply it for the interaction with the agent. So in this case, I'm going to say, I want to use model 2, which is the advanced. And I'm going to also say that I want to use data set, and you'll see I'll spell this wrong on purpose. Right? I said CIA fact book. You notice there's no underscore, and it also doesn't have a T in it. So I press enter. Copilot's going to process that input that I just gave it. It's going to realize that I want to use the advanced LLM, and it's also going to realize that, hey, I probably spelled some things wrong, and it's not exactly the same, but how does that compare to what we've got? And then the other thing that it's going to do is it's once again going to reach out to Cohesity Gaia just to make sure that I do indeed have access to that. So that's all done. We're using the CIA Factbook dataset. This dataset contains what you would find in the publicly available data from this dataset. However, you'll see when I run the queries, it's also kind of time bound, right? So we use older versions of it so that we can do some comparison here soon. All right. I would like to understand the GDP of Mexico, how that compares to other, we're going to say Latin American countries. All right, so now Teams is communicating with Copilot. It is taking this query, it is forming it, it is putting it in a format that the Gaia API understands. And this is where what we would call actual AI to AI conversation is happening. Copilot is the conversational front end. Cohesity Gaia is the secure backend that's handling the data, but is also using its advanced LLM model. So now it's responded. Based on my analysis, it gave me the GDP of Mexico. It also compares it to other Latin American countries like I asked it to. And importantly, it tells me exactly where in my backend data set these documents exist if I needed to go pull them and interact with them directly. Now, here's the magic of the blended response. So we have taken data, we've responded to Copilot, and now we want to pull a little bit more out. You notice these are at 2016, 2019, et cetera. Well, I would like to compare this to current data from the internet. So at this point, Copilot is actually able to look at this query that I'm sending that I want to compare it to current data from the internet and realize that it doesn't have to use that backend data from Gaia. Instead, it's going to use data from its training set that is much more recent, and it's going to be able to give us a comparison. And that's where the beauty of the blended response comes in. Because not only do I have access using the Cohesity Gaia backend to the data that's in my secure data estate, I can also use the Copilot model and what it's strong at to go out and get the more current data, in this case, the 2022 data, and perform these comparisons. So I'm not locked into just what Cohesity Gaia can give me or what Microsoft Copilot can give me. I have a very nice blended response where I can move back and forth between the strengths of Copilot and then the strengths of Cohesity Gaia. So as you can see, it's really powerful when you can take this back-end secure data and get it into the hands of your end users in the tools that they're familiar with and use on a regular basis.
That was fantastic. This gives me a great opportunity to kind of put it in context of how this would play out, giving customers access to their own proprietary data into their individual end users throughout their business, and also being able to blend that with outsourced LLMs speaking to the wild or the internet or what have you, blending those roles and keeping governance over it. That's amazing. How should people begin to start thinking about the baby steps to get to what you just showed here?
Well, as I said, first you're going to need Cohesity Gaia. You can reach out to Cohesity and get a free trial, and we can get you going there. Your next steps are really going to be to ask yourself, what question do you want to answer, and what interface would I like it to be answered in? For Microsoft with Copilot, you can actually start free trials right away, and you can get in the Copilot Studio and begin configuring these so that you can get it out into the different channels. And by the way, there's actually, if you haven't looked at Copilot recently, there has been some adjustments to the licensing model to make this more affordable and to get your return on investment faster.
Jonathan, this has been tremendously helpful for us. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jake. Have a great day.
And today's episode really only scratches the surface. There are other resources and things we'd like you to check out if you had the time. We have another discussion with Ryan Reed where he goes through how he enables his employees using Gaia for research projects, etc., accessing internal data. So there's a link available in the chat. Also, there's a white paper available on unlocking data insights, a great read there if you've got the time for it. And if you're one of those hands-on type folks, we've got free trials for you. So you can go ahead and start kicking the tires right away on Gaia. So a lot of things to consider. Fantastic list of guests here. I really want to thank them all individually for their time and powerful insights. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining us. Your input makes all the difference. So a survey is coming your way. Please let us know how we can make these more impactful for you. And we look forward to seeing you on the next future Cohesity event. Thank you so much.